Imagine for a moment, you are sleeping peacefully and, without realizing it, your soul begins to separate from your body. There is no pain, no struggle, no moment of awareness that usually accompanies death. It is like gently slipping from one dream into another state of existence. Sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But Cayce discovered that this apparent ease brings unique complications on the spiritual plane. During a reading in 1928, he revealed that people who die in their sleep often do not immediately realize they have died. They continue in what he called a perpetual dream state, where the boundary between dream and spiritual reality becomes blurred. This is not necessarily bad, but it requires a different kind of spiritual assistance, and Cayce feared that revealing these details could interfere with this natural process. What makes this even more intriguing is that, in his personal notes, Cayce wrote that he saw layers of spiritual protection around those who die in their sleep, as if the universe naturally created a shield to facilitate the transition. But he also observed that when the living begin to understand too much about this process, they may inadvertently break this protection through anxiety or expectation. But there's more. He mentioned in private letters that he discovered something about the timing of these deaths during sleep. They are not random. There are specific spiritual factors that determine when and how this happens, connected to the person's sleep cycles and their karmic preparation. This knowledge, according to him, could be misused by those seeking to control or predict death. The most disturbing aspect of Cayce's hesitations was his belief that revealing these secrets could create a spiritual epidemic of people trying to die in their sleep, believing it to be easier or better. He saw this as a dangerous interference in the natural divine plan of life and death. So why are we talking about this now? Because Cayce also said there would come a time in humanity when this knowledge would be necessary, when more people would need to understand these mysteries to help not only themselves, but also the souls making this transition. According to his own prophecies, that time is now. Death is not a single, uniform event. Just as there are different ways of being born, some dramatic, others gentle, there are different ways of dying, and each creates a completely distinct experience on the spiritual plane. Edgar Cayce discovered that the difference between dying awake and dying asleep is as significant as the difference between diving into a pool and slowly sliding into a warm bathtub. When you die awake, your consciousness is present. There is a moment, sometimes brief, sometimes prolonged, where you know you are leaving the body. It is like the last conscious act of your physical existence. Cayce described this as the Great Awakening, where the soul makes a conscious choice to depart. There is clarity, even if accompanied by fear or pain. But dying in your sleep is completely different. Imagine you are driving on a road and, without realizing it, you enter a different highway. You keep driving, the scenery gradually changes, but you do not notice the transition because you were distracted listening to music. That is how Cayce described death during sleep. A transition so smooth that consciousness simply slips into another state without noticing. During his readings, he revealed something extraordinary. Your astral body, that energetic version of you that separates during dreams and out-of-body experiences, is already naturally separated when you sleep. That's why, when death happens in this state, there is no shock of sudden separation. It's as if your soul is already halfway between worlds. Cayce explained that, during normal sleep, your astral body remains connected to the physical one by something he called the silver cord, an energetic link that allows you to return to the body when you need to wake up. When you die in your sleep, this cord doesn't break violently. It dissolves gradually, like a strand of sugar in the rain. That's why there is no energetic trauma. In deaths, while awake, especially traumatic ones, the soul often remains stuck to the body or the place of death for a period of time. It's as if the shock of separation creates a kind of spiritual confusion. The soul knows something drastic has happened, but it may take time to fully accept the new reality. In deaths during sleep, the opposite happens. The soul continues in what was called the dream mode even after leaving the body. It doesn't experience the shock, but it also doesn't have the immediate clarity that it has died. It's like continuing to dream, but on a different level of reality. Cayce also revealed that people who die awake often manage to communicate with the living more quickly. Since they are aware of the change of state, they can learn faster how to operate in the new dimension. It's like arriving in a foreign country awake versus arriving asleep. The one who arrives awake adapts more quickly to the new environment. But that doesn't mean one way is better than the other. Cayce emphasized that dying in your sleep brings its own spiritual advantages. Since there is no trauma, there is no residual fear or negative energy to process. The transition is cleaner, purer. It's like the difference between leaving the house running because you're late versus leaving calmly after putting everything in order. There is also a crucial difference in how these souls are received on the other side. Those who die awake are usually greeted by spiritual guides, prepared to handle possible trauma or confusion. But those who die in their sleep are received more gently, almost like parents carrying a sleeping child to bed without waking them. The most fascinating aspect is that people who die in their sleep often maintain a stronger connection with the dream world of the living. Since they transition through the dream state, they can access and influence the dreams of their loved ones more easily. It's as if they spoke the same language, the language of dreams. Finally, Cayce noted that the process of life review, that moment when we see and evaluate everything we've done, also happens differently. For those who die awake, this review can be intense and immediate. For those who die asleep, it happens more like a sequence of symbolic dreams, allowing for a more gradual and less traumatic digestion of their actions. Dying in your sleep is not an escape from spiritual responsibility. It's simply a different way of processing the same journey of growth and understanding that every soul must go through. The first 3 minutes after death during sleep are the most critical in determining what the entire experience of the soul in the beyond will be like. Edgar Cayce described these moments as the silent dance of release, where extraordinary events happen while the physical body has not yet completely cooled. Contrary to what many imagine, death is not instantaneous, not even when it happens during sleep. There is a gradual process that begins even before the person stops breathing. In the final moments before the last transition, the soul is already beginning to prepare, like someone packing their bags knowing the trip is near. In the first minute, something extraordinary happens. While the body still maintains some minimal vital signs, consciousness begins to expand. It's as if the walls of physical perception begin to dissolve. At this moment, the person sleeping often has what we now call intense lucid dreams, but which are actually the first experiences of expanded consciousness. During the second minute, what Cayce called the Great Release occurs. The silver cord, that energetic link between the physical body and the soul, does not break violently as in a traumatic death. It unravels gently, like silk threads dissolving in warm water. That's why there is no pain, no struggle, no panic that can accompany other types of death. At this moment, something unique happens with people who die in their sleep. They maintain the logic of dreams. You know how in dreams the most impossible things seem perfectly normal? How you can fly, or be in 2 places at once, or talk to people who died years ago, and it all makes sense within the dream. That same logic remains active during the transition. That's why the soul often doesn't immediately realize it has died. It simply accepts the new reality as it accepts the strange rules of a dream. If it suddenly finds it can walk through walls or fly, it thinks, "What an interesting dream," instead of, "Oh, I've died." The third minute is the most fascinating of all. It is at this moment that what Cayce called the welcoming committee appears. But here's the detail that few know. For people who die in their sleep, this committee often includes people the soul regularly encountered in dreams during life. When you die in your sleep, those familiar presences from your dreams are the first to greet you. It's like arriving at a party where you already know some people. There's less anxiety, more comfort. The soul recognizes these presences and feels safe, even without fully understanding what's happening. During these first 3 minutes, something else happens that Cayce called the memory backup. All life experiences, every conversation, every emotion, every thought, are downloaded and preserved in a more refined form. But for those who die in their sleep, this process happens as if it were a nostalgic dream, where you revisit scenes from life with the same gentle emotional quality you have when remembering beautiful dreams. There is also a unique temporal aspect in these 3 minutes. Although in the physical world they are only 3 minutes, for the transitioning consciousness they can feel like hours, days, or even years. It's like those dreams where you live entire years of experiences but wake up to find you've only slept a few hours. Cayce emphasized that these 3 minutes are sacred and should not be interrupted by excessive lamentation or desperate attempts at resuscitation. The soul needs this time to make the proper transition. Interfering in this process can cause spiritual confusion both for the one departing and for those left behind. There is an extraordinary phenomenon that Edgar Cayce discovered through his deepest readings. Some souls who die in their sleep simply do not wake up on the other side. They continue in a state of spiritual dormancy, creating a situation he described as the sleep within the sleep, a mystery that can last decades, centuries, or even millennia in spiritual time. This does not happen by chance. Cayce revealed that certain souls, for specific reasons, subconsciously choose to remain in this state of conscious limbo. It's like someone having such a good dream that they refuse to wake up, even when the alarm clock rings. But in the spiritual plane, the implications of this choice are much more complex and profound. But why does this happen specifically to people who die in their sleep? The answer lies in the very nature of the transition. Since there was no trauma, there was no shock that normally forces the soul to recognize it has changed states. It's like dozing off on the couch while watching television and continuing to dream that you're still watching the same program. Cayce identified several types of souls that tend to experience this phenomenon. First, those who had very difficult or traumatic lives. For them, the dream state finally represents relief, a safe place where they no longer need to face challenges. It is understandable that they would want to remain there. Second, souls that had very intense earthly attachments. People who loved their families, their homes, their routines so deeply that they prefer to keep dreaming that they still live that reality instead of accepting that they need to move on. They create elaborate dream scenarios where they continue interacting with loved ones, working at the same jobs, living in the same houses. The third group are those Cayce called the seekers of postponed perfection. These are souls who always believed real life would begin tomorrow, when they got the ideal job, the perfect relationship, the dream house. In death, they simply keep postponing, creating eternal dreams about that perfect life that never arrived. These souls are not truly trapped. They are choosing to remain in that state. It's like someone who has the key to their own room but decides not to leave because they're comfortable inside. At any moment, they can choose to awaken and continue their spiritual journey. The problem is that while they remain in this state, they do not grow spiritually. It's like repeating the same school year indefinitely. They are safe, comfortable, but they are not learning, not evolving, not fulfilling the greater purpose of their existence as a soul. Cayce revealed that there are spiritual alarm clocks, specialized souls who work to help these dormant consciousnesses make the choice to awaken. They enter the dreamlike scenarios of these souls and gradually introduce elements that make them question the reality they are living. It's like those dreams where something doesn't add up, you look at your hands and they look strange, or you try to read something and the words keep changing. These spiritual alarm clocks create subtle inconsistencies that plant seeds of doubt in the soul's eternal dream. Cayce discovered that some of these dormant souls can influence the physical world through the dreams of the living. Since they exist in a dream state, they have natural access to the dream world of incarnated people. Sometimes they appear in the dreams of relatives, not as visiting spirits, but as if they were still alive, creating recurring and confusing dreams for the dreamer. There is a responsibility of the living in this situation. He advised that when we know someone dear has died in their sleep, we should mentally give permission for that person to continue their spiritual journey. Sometimes the excessive love of those who remain can inadvertently hold the soul in the eternal sleep state. The good news is that this phenomenon, although it can last a long time, is not permanent. Every soul eventually makes the choice to awaken and continue its spiritual evolution. It is only a matter of when they are ready to leave the safety of the dream and embrace the adventure of conscious spiritual growth. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects Edgar Cayce discovered is how the soul subconsciously prepares for death during sleep through premonitory dreams. He revealed that weeks or even months before the final transition, many people begin receiving dream warnings, dreams that, on the surface, seem normal, but carry deep symbols of the imminent departure. The soul, according to Cayce, has a wisdom that transcends the conscious mind. It knows when the earthly contract is coming to an end and begins a gradual process of preparation. It's like your body that starts preparing to sleep hours before you consciously decide to go to bed, yawning, slowing down, creating drowsiness. Premonitory dreams of one's own death have specific characteristics. First, they often involve travel. The person dreams they are going on a long trip, boarding trains, planes, or simply walking down a road that never ends. These travel dreams rarely show the final destination, only the journey. Second, deceased relatives or friends often appear. But here's the crucial detail. In these premonitory dreams, these departed people seem to be waiting or preparing something, as if organizing a welcome party. They may not directly say that the person will die, but there is a sense of expectation that something important is about to happen. A pattern Cayce repeatedly observed was dreams about houses. The person dreams they are leaving their current house and moving to a new one, larger, more beautiful, filled with light. Sometimes it is a childhood home, other times a house they've never seen before, but that in the dream feels familiar. The feeling in the dream is always positive, that they are going to a better place. There is also the phenomenon of cleaning dreams. People approaching death in their sleep often dream they are organizing drawers, sorting papers, cleaning closets, or giving away belongings. It's as if the soul knows it needs to set things in order before departure. One of the most touching aspects of these premonitory dreams is that they often include symbolic farewells. The person dreams they are saying goodbye to important places in their life, the school they studied at, their first job, the church where they were married. It's as if the soul were taking a farewell tour of the life it is leaving behind. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever had dreams that felt very real with people who have already died? Or dreams about long journeys that left you with a strange feeling upon waking? I want to hear your experiences. But perhaps the most extraordinary thing is that some people begin dreaming about the very process of dying in their sleep. They dream they are lying in bed, feeling very tired, and then begin to float gently out of the body. In the dream, there is no fear, only a sense of lightness and peace. Cayce believed these were rehearsals the soul performed to prepare the consciousness for the real transition. There is a specific temporal pattern in these dreams. Cayce noted that the more symbolic premonitory dreams happen weeks or months before, while the more direct ones, where the person actually dreams of their own death, occur in the last days or hours before the transition. A fascinating discovery was that people who pay attention to these dreams and accept them peacefully tend to have even smoother deaths in their sleep. It is as if consciously recognizing the signs allows greater cooperation between the conscious mind and the soul, creating a more harmonious transition. These premonitory dreams are not just for the person who is about to die. Close family members often begin to have strange dreams as well, dreaming of their loved ones saying goodbye, traveling, or simply appearing in the dream with a different, more ethereal, more luminous presence. The most intriguing aspect is that some people, upon receiving these premonitory dreams, instinctively begin making practical preparations without understanding why. They organize documents, write wills, or have important conversations with family members, driven by an urgency they cannot rationally explain. Cayce emphasized that these dreams should not be feared, but honored. They represent the natural wisdom of the soul preparing for the next phase of existence. It is like an inner Mother Nature taking care of all the details so that the transition is as smooth as possible. Knowledge of these patterns can be used positively. When we recognize these dream signs in ourselves or in loved ones, we can use that time for important conversations, forgiveness, expressions of love, and spiritual preparation. Finally, people who develop a regular practice of dream interpretation during life tend to receive these premonitory signs more clearly and less fearfully. It's as if they were fluent in the language the soul uses to communicate with us through dreams. When the soul finally awakens in the spiritual plane after dying in sleep, the initial experience is unique and can be deeply disorienting. Edgar Cayce described this moment as waking up inside another dream, where the soul must gradually distinguish between the new spiritual reality and the remnants of dream consciousness it carried through the transition. The first thing the soul notices is that its body feels different, yet familiar. Initially, the soul maintains the appearance and bodily sensations it had on Earth, like a kind of comfortable clothing that eases adaptation. But this spiritual body can do things impossible in the physical world, pass through objects, move instantly, or change appearance according to thought. For souls who died in their sleep, this discovery happens gradually, almost accidentally. They may try to open a door and pass straight through it, or think of a loved one and suddenly appear next to that person. The initial reaction is usually surprise, followed by the typical rationalization of dreams. What a strange dream I'm having. One of the most challenging aspects of this initial phase is what Cayce called the reality test. The soul must learn to distinguish between earthly memories, dreamlike experiences from the transition, and the new spiritual reality. It's like waking up from a very vivid dream and spending a few minutes trying to separate what was dream from what was real, but multiplied by 1,000. The disorientation is intensified because the initial spiritual environment often reflects the soul's expectations and beliefs. But here is where the confusion deepens. Since the soul died in sleep and retains the logic of dreams, it accepts these changes in environment and situation as normal. Only gradually does it begin to question, why does everything seem so changeable? Why do things shift according to what I think? The process of accepting death usually happens in waves. The soul may go through periods believing it is still alive, interspersed with moments of clarity where it realizes that something fundamental has changed. Cayce observed that souls who die in their sleep often seek out their earthly homes as their first conscious destination in the spiritual plane. They wake up spiritually and think, I need to go back home. But when they arrive, they discover they can observe what is happening, but cannot interact in the same way as before. This is often the first real clue that something has drastically changed. The confusion intensifies when they try to communicate with living family members. They may speak, shout, touch, but there is no response. It's as if they have become invisible and inaudible. This can create a period of frustration and even denial. Some souls even come to believe that they are the ones who have gone deaf, or that everyone else is deliberately ignoring them. It is at this moment that spiritual guides usually appear, those loving presences that help newly arrived souls adapt to the new reality. But for souls who died in their sleep, these guides need to be especially patient and gentle. They often begin appearing in the soul's ongoing dreams, gradually introducing the truth of the situation. Before I tell you about the most transformative moment of this awakening journey, I want to give you a special invitation. If you want to master this connection with higher planes of consciousness and learn to manifest your reality consciously, I invite you to the Quantum Thinking Challenge, a 21-day program, where you will reprogram your mind, raise your vibration, and unlock your full energetic potential. For 3 weeks, you'll have daily practices to transform your frequency and begin attracting everything you desire. The first participants have already shared amazing breakthroughs appearing in their lives. Are you ready for yours too? Access it in the first pinned comment. The most transformative moment in the spiritual awakening of a soul that died in sleep is what Cayce called the Great Recognition. It is when the soul finally understands, with total clarity, that it has died and is now in a new phase of existence. This moment is usually accompanied by a wave of emotions: relief, sadness, excitement, longing, and curiosity, all at once. But unlike traumatic deaths, where this recognition may come with shock or panic, for those who die in their sleep, this moment is more like a gentle, ah. Of course, it's like finally understanding the answer to a riddle that had been bothering you. There is a sense that, deep down, the soul already knew, but was simply waiting to be ready to consciously accept it. From this moment of recognition onward, the soul can truly begin its journey in the spiritual plane. The initial confusion gradually dissipates, replaced by a growing curiosity about the possibilities of this new existence. It's like waking up in a fascinating foreign country, intimidating at first, but full of potential for incredible discoveries. Cayce emphasized that this period of initial confusion is not a failure or a problem. It is a natural and necessary part of spiritual adaptation. It is like an acclimation period that allows the soul to transition gradually, preserving its identity and memories, while adapting to the new abilities and realities of the spiritual world. The life review after death, that moment of contemplation where the soul observes and evaluates everything it did during its earthly existence, happens in a completely unique way for people who die in their sleep. Edgar Cayce revealed that, unlike conscious deaths, where this review can be intense and immediate, for those who die asleep, it unfolds as a series of deep symbolic dreams, allowing for a smoother and more gradual process of self-evaluation. This review does not happen all at once, but unfolds over what would be weeks or months in spiritual time. It is as if the soul had all of eternity to truly understand each choice, each action, each moment of its recently completed life. There is no rush, no pressure, no trauma that may accompany more abrupt reviews. Cayce revealed that one of the most transformative parts of the review during sleep are the dreams of unrealized potential. The soul sees not only what it did, but what it could have done. It sees opportunities for love it let pass, chances for growth it avoided, moments where it could have chosen courage instead of fear. But these visions do not come loaded with torturous regret. Instead, they create a profound understanding of the lessons the soul came to learn, and that it can apply in future existences, or in its work in the spiritual plane. It's like seeing a map of the unexplored territories of its own evolution. One of Edgar Cayce's most extraordinary revelations about people who die in their sleep is their exceptional ability to communicate with the living through dreams. Since these souls transitioned using the dream language and maintain a natural connection with the dream world, they become true specialists in interdimensional communication, creating bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds in ways that other souls take much longer to master. The reason behind this special ability lies in the very nature of the transition. When a person dies in their sleep, their soul does not completely leave behind the dream state. It expands it. It's as if, instead of waking up from a dream into physical reality, they wake up from a smaller dream into a greater universal dream. This keeps the channels of communication open with the dream world of the living. These souls can access the dreams of their loved ones with impressive ease. It's as if they know the specific frequency of each close person and know exactly when and how to tune in to that frequency to deliver important messages. They don't need to force their way into dreams. They simply flow into them naturally. The first communications usually happen within days or weeks after death, much more quickly than would be typical for souls who went through more traumatic transitions. This is because there is no recovery or adaptation period needed. They are already operating in the dreamlike dimension that allows this communication. Not every dream of a deceased person is real communication, but there is a distinctive quality in genuine communication dreams. They leave a lasting emotional impression, often bring new information or unexpected insights, and leave a feeling of peace or resolution. An important aspect of these communications is that they respect free will. Souls never force messages upon people who are not emotionally ready to receive them. If someone is in deep denial about the death or is not psychologically prepared for spiritual communication, these souls patiently wait for the right moment. Cayce revealed that these dream communication abilities often extend beyond the immediate family. Souls who died in their sleep can communicate with anyone they had a significant emotional connection with during life: close friends, mentors, even people they impacted briefly, but in a meaningful way. These communications serve not only to comfort the living, but also to help the soul's own spiritual evolution. Every successful communication, every message of love or guidance delivered, contributes to the soul's ongoing spiritual growth in the higher plane, creating a beneficial cycle of love and service that transcends physical death. At the end of his life, Edgar Cayce began to develop what he considered his most important and dangerous discovery: specific methods to train for a conscious and peaceful death during sleep. These techniques, which he called preparation for the Great Transition, were taught only to a very restricted circle of advanced students, as he believed they could be misused or cause unforeseen spiritual consequences. The central concept of these practices was revolutionary. Just as we can train our body to sleep better through routines and habits, we can train our soul to make the transition of death in a more conscious and harmonious way. Cayce believed that death does not have to be an event that simply happens to us, but something we can actively participate in, even if it happens during sleep. The first technique he developed was what he called dream rehearsals. Every night, before sleeping, the person should imagine themselves gently leaving the physical body, floating above it, and then returning with gratitude and love. The goal was not to induce traumatic out-of-body experiences, but to familiarize consciousness with the sensation of temporary separation from the physical body. During these mental rehearsals, Cayce instructed people to also practice loving detachment, looking at their own body and life with deep gratitude, but without desperate attachment. It was like learning to hold everything you love with open hands, ready to let go when the right moment came, without resistance or bitterness. The second practice involved what he called preparatory communication with loved ones who had already died. Through deep meditation or states of conscious dreaming, the person should establish regular connections with deceased family members, not to predict when they would die, but to strengthen the spiritual bridges that would facilitate the transition when it eventually happened. Cayce discovered that people who maintained these regular spiritual connections during life had much smoother transitions after death. It was like having a welcome committee, already organized and familiar, instead of arriving in the spiritual plane as a complete stranger. The third technique was perhaps the most powerful: anticipatory forgiveness. Cayce instructed people to do a regular life review while still alive, actively forgiving everyone who had hurt them, and asking forgiveness, even mentally, from everyone they had harmed. The idea was to complete the forgiveness process before death, so there would be no unnecessary emotional baggage to process during the transition. He emphasized that this forgiveness had to be genuine, not merely intellectual. The person should truly feel the emotional release, the peace that comes from true forgiveness. This often required deep therapeutic work or intensive spiritual guidance. The fourth practice involved developing what Cayce called conscious spiritual identity. Instead of identifying only as John, accountant, married, father of two, the person should cultivate a deeper identity as an eternal soul on a journey of growth, temporarily expressing through John. The fifth technique was the practice of transcendent gratitude, not only gratitude for the good things in life, but gratitude for the difficult experiences that produced growth, for the losses that taught detachment, for the challenges that developed spiritual strength. It was a way of seeing the entire life as a perfect gift, even with all its difficulties. The sixth practice involved what he called preparatory service. The person should dedicate part of their life to helping others in their own spiritual journeys, not necessarily as a teacher or religious leader, but simply by being a loving and supportive presence in other people's lives. The most advanced and secret technique was transition programming. Through deep meditative states, the person could communicate with their own higher self or soul, expressing preferences about how they would like their death to happen, peacefully during sleep, surrounded by family, without prolonged suffering. The final secret, Cayce revealed only in his last readings, was about the importance of the emotional state at the moment of death. He discovered that the last dominant feeling before the final transition deeply influenced the initial experience in the spiritual plane. Finally, Cayce emphasized that these practices were not about escaping life or hastening death, but about living so consciously and lovingly that, when natural death arrived, it would simply be the next natural adventure in a journey of infinite love. And so we come to the end of this journey through the mysteries of death during sleep, as revealed by Edgar Cayce. What began as forbidden knowledge is revealed as deeply loving wisdom about the continuity of consciousness and the infinite possibilities of spiritual existence. Remember, death is not an end, but a transformation. And for those who make this transition in their sleep, it can be one of the smoothest and most beautiful experiences of the soul's entire journey.